I'm Nora Herold. It's nice to have this time with you. Thank you.
I'm Wendy Kennedy.
Before I was channeling, I was waitressing and I was an actress. I have a degree in theater from Columbia College in Chicago, and I was doing a lot of children's theater. I also had my own theater company for a while. I was doing a lot of non-paying, independently run theater work, and then began consciously channeling when I was 29. So I was waitressing at that time as well. Well, certainly I'm comfortable in front of an audience. And acting opened me up to channeling, because anybody who expresses themselves creatively is channeling. So it taught me very early on, or allowed me to remember early on, how to access other energies, other emotional states, other frequencies, other experiences, and bring them through my physical body and transmit them out to the audience, which now is exactly what I do when I channel. I just bring through this kind of information now. Waitressing taught me to serve.
Literally.
Literally, yes. And my guides told me that. As I began channeling, I remember having a conversation with them one night about waitressing and the challenges I was feeling in waitressing, and they said, it's all about service. This life, this work is all about service. And that really helped me actually love waitressing even more at the time.
Wendy, how about you?
Kind of a similar path. I went to the University of Kansas, and I have a degree in theater and film. And looking back now, it was the perfect training ground for me for accessing a lot of different parts of myself, because, this is back in the late 80s and early 90s, and I'm in Kansas. Where else was I going to be exposed to yoga, qigong, Alexander technique, a lot of things that allowed me to work with my physical body, and just looking at programming. What's the motivation? Why do we do the things that we do? And as an actor, that's one of the first things you look at. What's your motivation? What's your subtext? So it really helped me to get in tune with that as well. And it wasn't long after I graduated college, just 2 years after that, that I started channeling. And at the time, I was living in Chicago and doing my starving artist thing, waiting tables, although my experience wasn't quite the same as Nora's. Waiting tables created anxiety for me. And then, I did that for quite a while, did a lot of office temp work while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And then I kind of moved into more corporate work and working with a company that purchased for hotels, and working in teaching and helping to design procurement software. So that kind of took me off in a whole other direction, which still played into what I do today as far as teaching goes, and how to work with the web and all those things. And probably about 8 years ago, I started doing it full time. Actually, not even that long ago, full time. So on a official basis, 8 years ago, and then full time almost four years ago. Years?
16 years.
Yeah, it has been that long.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
December of whatever 16 years ago was in December.
Nora remembers every detail. I can barely remember my name, so I always looked at her for the details. Yeah, it has been that long, and it.
1996. November of 1996 is when we first met. And began channeling together immediately. So that was the purpose of our meeting. That we were put together by a mutual friend, Amy, Amy waitressed with Wendy, and Amy and I worked at Victoria's Secret together many years ago when we were in our early 20s. That's how we came to know each other. And Amy just realized at some point that the three of us needed to get together and meet and hang out. So Wendy channeled for me the very first night I met her in this lifetime. And I had had my own contact with my guides just a week or so before then. And Wendy, in that channeling session for me, confirmed so much of the experience that I had had myself just a week prior, and that was an amazing gift.
For me, sometimes I'll hear the exact same thing that's coming through, and then there's a slightly different quality because it's coming through Nora, because Nora's filter's there, my filter's there. But the energy will start to build up, and then I'll feel almost pushed to speak. It's kind of an interesting sensation, and I'll know. And sometimes there's just a lull, and then they'll push. That's the best way I think I can describe it. It's a push.
It is. It is. I feel exactly the same thing. I'll be enjoying Wendy's transmission and often hearing the same as she's delivering it. And then I'll feel that energetic buildup. And sometimes I will even hear the Pleiadians say, Wendy is going to stop speaking soon and you're next. So sometimes I'll get an actual auditory cue from them. You know, it's just like, I think for us, it's like music. It's like musicians working together. Wendy and I also share such a connection that we're also transmitting with each other telepathically. So
yeah, that happens a lot. We won't finish the sentence. One will start, hey, have you? Yeah, I've done it.
Right.
And John will be standing there. He's like, did I miss part of this conversation? You know, we were complete in our conversation.
So it happens when we're up in front of an audience as well. And often I think we're not consciously aware of those telepathic conversations. But they're happening, and we're directing each other without realizing we're directing each other and ourselves, and then being directed. And we also have just a tremendous amount of love and respect for each other and really trust each other. So it's never a matter of feeling awkward or uncomfortable. I'm completely comfortable next to Wendy channeling in that way, as I'm completely comfortable channeling the beings that I channel. It's interesting that you said rehearse. You know, the first time Wendy and I channeled together publicly, which was in December of 2010, we didn't rehearse it. We never rehearse what were our quote unquote act. We did, for the Sex and Sexuality DVD, again, do some channeling sessions specifically on the subject matter so we could feel more comfortable with the material ourselves. We could have gone up there that day and just pressed the go button like we usually do and let it come through. But Sex and Sexuality it's a button for everyone, including us. So we felt like to be able to be the voice for it, we had to get in touch with the material beforehand.
But then when we start to channel, we never know exactly what's coming out. That's always an experience. And then also the questions that get posed, because that, you know, it's really the questions that drive the conversations. And one of the things that's always very interesting for us, or at least for me, is when we get the feedback where people say all the time, they answer my question before I even got a chance to ask it.
Yes.
And they'll do that. They'll take the poll,
yes.
and then give the information.
Or often we'll hear from audience members that they didn't need to ask a question because somebody else in the space asked their question for them. And, you know, for those of you who are interested in viewing the material, you will come in with your own questions and they will be answered because they will have been asked by somebody else there in the room that day.
I think the strongest one that we have recollection of was Atlantis. And in that lifetime, I was Nora's daughter, and our friend Amy was my aunt.
So she was my niece in that lifetime. And that lifetime actually began for me on Lemuria. I was Lyran Earthling hybrid, so that was my Lemurian identity. My partner in this lifetime, Jonathan, was Wendy's father in that lifetime, but he was full-on Lyran, so he wasn't really a part of her life, so to speak. And when Lemuria was removed from the planet and I was sent to Atlantis, I was pregnant with Wendy at the time. So Wendy first came into being in that lifetime on Atlantis. I was also pregnant at the time with her twin brother. So we should explain this. How do we know this? Right? As we began channeling together and playing together, and it really was play back then for us, we began to have really strong, vivid past life memories of that period of time.
And I mean, that sometimes it would come in imagery that we'd have individually, and then we'd come together and start to talk about it. And as we started to tell the story of what we'd already recalled, one of the other parties, either Nora or Amy or myself, would fill in the blanks or would say, "Oh, and then we did this," and you were like, "Yes, that's what I saw." So we got a lot of confirmation about that. But it was an incredibly intense life, and there was a lot to process. I mean, we processed a lot of issues around persecution, about power and abuse of power, competition, lots of stuff that was our work to do. So I think during that time while we were learning how to channel, we processed and cleared a lot of our personal stuff.
We did. And
it wasn't easy.
It wasn't at all. And we were young, you know, we were...
And that's in part what we used the channeling for. That's what kept us motivated, what kept us checking in, and we would get advice and guidance from the guides. And I think that's played into the work that Nora and I do today, and how we structure things, how we work with clients, how we work with groups, what we learn from our own personal experience.
You know, I can remember very vividly that I had recalled that Amy was my niece first in that lifetime, because that was an easier memory for me to access. And then it was just a little while after that I recalled Wendy being my daughter. And Wendy and I had a very intense relationship in that lifetime. We had the...
That's such a nice way to put it.
We had the typical archetypal mother-daughter relationship in that lifetime, magnified by about 1,000 when you bring in the fact that we were on Atlantis and everything that was going on in Atlantis, and there were periods of time where she and I wound up on opposite sides of the story, and we're literally
fighting.
Yeah, trying to kill each other.
Energy ball.
Yes, and we both have recalled trying to kill each other.
Yeah.
So initially, when I remembered she was my daughter, I felt a lot of, intense love as that memory came in, but also some grief. And I didn't tell her that I had the memory, because it's also very confusing when you're the same age, hanging out as friends, also remembering that you're somebody's mother. And we were on somebody's back porch on an evening in Chicago, and we were talking about that time, and Wendy just looked at me and said, "Were you my mom?" And I said, "Yep." And she said, "I was a twin." And I said, "Yes." And this was how we confirmed each other's memories. I had accessed that information on my own, had not communicated it to her, and she just confirmed it all. It was an amazing period of time as we awakened and remembered to channel and remembered many, many lifetimes and experiences. It was amazing, and at times made it very difficult for us to function in our day-to-day lives here. I mean, I can remember waitressing. You know, I'd be waiting on my tables, getting all of this information about everybody I was serving, intense personal information about them, standing in the kitchen saying, "Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up!" You know, because I was learning. They said to me in that moment, "We're always transmitting to you. You've got to learn when to receive, when to unplug. It's up to you. You've got to run the show here." And I would also get in trouble because I would always give psychic information or channeled information to my tables, and most of them enjoyed it, but occasionally there would be a complaint to management, and they'd pull me in the office and say, "Really, you can't do that any longer." But I couldn't help it. You know, if somebody needed something.
That's appropriate. Some level or another. Nora. I mean,
Yeah.
this is normal. Not to be connected seems abnormal. So I think that's one of the things that made it easier for us because it just felt right. And so it wasn't such a struggle. And we didn't get that feedback from other people that it was weird or strange because we didn't think it was weird or strange. It felt very, very normal. And then, you know, I've been channeling for about almost a year and a half before I met Nora. So here I've now created this structure with friends, and this is what my friends do. This is normal for my group. So we didn't really have that experience, but people access information all the time. That's one of the things I love the most is when people say, oh, I don't channel, or I don't have this ability or that. And you'll stand there and you'll watch them, because when somebody channels, their entire energetic field will change. They'll bring through this amazing information, and yet they're not conscious of the fact that they've either just connected with their own higher self, or their guides, or somebody else's guides, or the Akashic Records. And we all do it all the time, and it's just the most normal thing to do. We're just not conscious of the fact that we're doing it.
I think for many people who are connected in and don't understand that they're connected in, it can be confusing and overwhelming. You know, and I think that's also what we're talking about here is how do you start to process that? Like, how do you deal with that? For us, it was always about recognition. As soon as we would allow ourselves to recognize what it was we were receiving, who it was we were receiving the information from, where the information needed to go, because this is a big part of it as well. When you channel, it's not just about receiving the information. It's also about disseminating the information and knowing who the information is for. So for all of you out there listening, when you feel something and you feel a connection or you feel a thought, ask yourself, okay, where am I receiving this? From whom am I receiving this? And who is this for? Is this for me? Is this for someone I love? Is this for a friend? And when you ask these questions, understand you'll be answered because they want to help. The guides, the Pleiadians, Yeshua, the fairies, the Lyrans, on and on and on, they want to help. They want to transmit. They're always transmitting. So the more questions you ask, the more information you're going to get. And that's something we were really good at when we were young. You know, we had a lot of questions, and we did not hesitate to ask each other questions all the time to prompt more information coming through. You know, I also believe that we contracted to do this work in this lifetime. So for us, when we opened up to it and reconnected when we were younger, it was like a switch was flipped inside of us. We knew we were following our karmic path.
I will say this, you know, you ask about past lives or how do people deal with that piece of it. A lot of people will access past lives, or they feel they're in a situation or scenario and their emotions are out of balance for what's going on. It's usually an indication that they're tapping into a past life issue, or they're tapping into a genetic line issue. Somewhere in their energetic field, they're storing the record of that frequency. And through the laws of resonance, when you strike that chord or that note where it exists in the now, anywhere else that it exists in your field, it starts to vibrate.
Right.
So people are experiencing that more and more. And also right now, because with the solstices, each solstice we're connecting at higher and higher levels. So we've connected to the collective consciousness in a stronger way. This last solstice, we connected to the solar system. And the one coming up this summer, we're going to connect to the galaxy. So we're starting to feel more of the resonance of issues that are aligned with each of those levels. So not only are we getting our own personal stuff, our past lives, but that's happening more and more. And these solar flares are also affecting it. And so for people out there who are starting to access that stuff, check in, kind of visually follow in your mind's eye where that thread goes, where is it anchored, and that's going to help you, because otherwise it can feel incredibly intense and overwhelming. So it's just about coming back to center, and how do you deal with it? Deal with where it's going on now in your life. So yeah, you may have had all this crap go on in past lives, but you're not going to access it unless you have it going on right here, right now. So look to the now and deal with it in the now, and you'll take care of it at all those other levels.
My understanding of what's happening is that we're shifting from a third dimensional interpretation of reality to a fifth dimensional interpretation of reality, with a minor adjustment to the way we have processed the fifth dimension. So ultimately we're in the process of creating an entirely new experience, where we're going to allow ourselves access to more information, more of our own abilities, and where we're really going to remember that we're a collective, that we're all one, and that when one feels something, they feel it both for the collective, and also when one feels something, they're aware that everyone else in the collective is feeling it as well. And we're going to step away from the individual expression and come back to a more collective understanding of reality, where we all begin to really love and support each other. When that will happen, how that will all shake out, all of that remains to be seen.
Change. And that's just it, as Nora was saying. The guides say they just don't know. And if anybody tells you that they do know, then that's not accurate, because we haven't been through this scenario in this way before. And it is a shift in dimensional structure. How we get there, how easy it is, how challenging it is all dependent on the frequencies that we choose. And then you also have to consider the element of time and the illusion of time, and the experience of multiple realities. And from where we're standing or sitting, that is really hard to grasp, because we're looking for an answer that's very linear, it's very clean, and reality doesn't exist that way. We can put ourselves on another now moment, which is based on an agreed upon set of circumstances at a personal level and a collective level, and those can be vastly different. So it's a bit of a mind bender when you start to think about it, that I can put myself on a timeline that's different than the one that Nora is going to choose, and she'll be over having a different experience with a different version of me. But this is where my consciousness is choosing to focus itself from a 3D perspective. So this is the illusion of experience that I'm having, which may be different than the one that this version of Nora that I'm communicating with now is going to have 10 minutes from now. So yeah, I have to take a breath like that one. So I say that, but you have to understand the concept of time from a multidimensional perspective, and that's the one thing the guides go back to continuously, because until we understand that, we're going to look for a singular answer, and reality doesn't exist that way.
I want to talk about predicting for a minute. When I started my professional practice as a channel and a psychic, I did a lot of prediction work for many years. And people would come to me for that kind of service. They wanted to know when they were going to find the one, when they were going to get a better job, what that better job might look like, where they were going to move to. And we spent a lot of time, meaning me and the guides, helping people not just understand what all those things were going to be, but also how to get there. But there was a lot of predictive work, and I was comfortable doing predictive work. I enjoyed that aspect of the work. I could look at a tarot spread, and I could look at somebody's energy and easily see 6 months from now you're going to be in that relationship, and that would manifest. What's happening now, and what's been happening for the last couple of years, is very challenging to predict anything any longer because of the collective shift in consciousness. We are now jumping timelines and accelerating our shift at such an amazing rate that when I look at a future probability now, that could change in 1 second. Whereas 10 years ago, if I looked at a future probability, maybe it would take 6 months for that change to occur. Now a change can occur like that. So they have really gotten away, I have really gotten away from doing much prediction work at all. with the people that I talk with. Occasionally still, something will come through. Typically now, when the guides offer that kind of information, it is to reinforce and support the path the person that I'm talking with is already on. And it's given in this very kind of lovingly, even cheerleading-like kind of way. Yes, you're going to get there. And when that comes through, there's a level of certainty to it that I can feel within my body. But the rest of it doesn't happen any longer.
Yeah, the focus has tended to, I think the focus is now more on what do you want? What do you want to create? Why are you asking this question? So that we start getting in the driver's seat instead of being in a reactive position, we're now in a proactive stance or in a proactive position so that we start working in a fifth dimensional way. I mean, we're already creating our own reality. We're already manifesting 100% of our reality 100% of the time. We're just doing most of it at the subconscious level instead of the conscious. So now when people ask those kinds of questions, the guides really do say, well, why are you asking? Mm-hmm. Because usually it's fear-based.
Yes.
There is some fear that's prompting it. And when we start to look at that, we can clear that stuff so that we can start creating exactly what we want. We don't have to ask what's coming because we know what's coming because we're directing it. And we have faith in that. We trust that. And it'll become, and we're already seeing it, become more and more immediate. And time is accelerating. The higher frequencies move through time and space at a faster rate. So as we get higher in frequency, time appears to be compressing until we step out of time, until we cross the dimensional barrier. There's a whole other thing with 4D, because we're actually in 4D right now, but in 4D you can project 3D rules of the game or 5D rules of the game, and almost 95% of the time we are still projecting 3D rules, but we can alter that and we can experience no time. But we're still hanging on and clinging on to the old game right now.
Sure, because it's familiar. You know, I went through a very dramatic shift in my practice right around the winter solstice of 2007. I was getting ready to sit down with a client, meaning pick up the phone and call them because I have people all over the world, as does Wendy. So I work mostly remotely. Rarely do I see people in person. I do, but that's rare. So I was sitting down to get ready for a session, and I had my tarot cards because I worked with both tarot and channeling, both practices together. And as I was getting ready for this session, about 5 minutes before I was going to call this client, my guide said to me, "Put your tarot cards down and don't touch them again." And I had practiced that way for many years, but I trusted my guides enough to say, okay, fine. So I did that session, just full on channeling, translating what I got, some direct voice channeling. And then afterwards, I talked with my guides and they said, all of your tools are changing. All the way you process information is changing. And the tarot was created to help those of you in the third dimension access higher dimensional information. But as you are now shifting to your fifth dimensional identities, the tarot, that tool, if used with its original intent, will ground you in the third dimension. So I occasionally will use my tarot cards for myself now when I am looking for guidance for myself. But I have to work very hard at being very present with the images in the moment, not deferring back to the archetypal meanings of the cards, and really just access information in that way. And all of our modalities are changing in this way. All of them. Even the way we channel has changed in the last couple of years. I mean, for me, it used to feel as if I had to really work at raising my vibration to be able to access that information and those connections. Now, more and more, especially when I'm working with those beings, the Pleiadians, Yeshua, etc., those that I'm really comfortable with, I feel like I'm accessing those aspects of myself.
And I think it's become more real time.
Yes.
I think in the beginning we would get bits and pieces of information and kind of digest, and then it would allow us to attract people who needed that information. Because when you channel, if you're in the way, you can't bring the information through. And it's for me, when I channel, it's almost like I'm standing beside myself. The words are coming out of my mouth, and my lips are moving, and I hear it a split second before it comes out. And sometimes they'll be talking, and I'll be having a side conversation, which is a little tricky.
Yes.
And if it was brand new information, you know, it's like I get caught up in the conversation over here, and it would be distracting. So especially at the beginning, they would give us the information first, and we'd have a chance to digest it and process it. And because of that, then we would call in people who needed that kind of information. And I think now, especially Nora and I have done a few events together, and it's like, well, do you know what's coming out today? It's like, oh, we'll see what comes out. This will be interesting. And it is real time. I don't hear it a split second before. It just comes out.
Yes.
And sometimes it's brand new concepts. And part of me is still standing beside me going, huh? Okay, I need more clarification, but we'll come back. I think we've gotten better at kind of pushing the pause button on myself, because, I mean, I do have that desire to know more. And what will happen, interestingly, is, especially in group settings, somebody else will ask it for me.
Yes.
So I'll get the answer for me.
Recently, the Pleiadians ran an exercise with me in a group where they had everyone imagine that their mouths were centered right over their hearts. And they were talking about more of a heart-centered communication. And they were playing with me as they were doing this. And I was really just channeling in that moment everything straight through my heart. And I found a tremendous shift even in my own channeling again. This was just a week or so ago. As I realized, as I channel through my heart center, my mind cannot be involved in that process at all. So this is another part of the shift that we're moving through. We are really becoming heart-centered individuals, understanding that the heart is the computer and the mind is really just a processor.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as two different operating systems.
Yeah.
You know, the mind was the operating system for 3D. The heart's the operating system for 5D. You can't run them both at the same time. It's either one or the other, which is kind of where we're at in 4D right now. We can run either one and go back and forth. The problem is we can't stay in 5 yet, because those old programs get triggered, and there is an ebb and a flow to the evolution. And I think people sometimes get caught up in that. They berate themselves, why can't I stay in this high frequency? Because you weren't meant to. We're still experiencing a dualistic experience, even all the way up through dimensional structure. There's duality. The extremes of duality aren't quite as extreme. This is the most extreme and the densest that we're experiencing, and that's why they say sometimes, you know, this is the hardest game in town. And God, I just so far went way off. What am I talking about?
Well, it keeps the mind from
Yeah.
doing it, right?
See, that's just it. Because in the moment, if I'm heart-centered, everything will just come out, and then the mind goes, "What were we talking about?" When I start to think about it. So, yeah, mind.
Take a breath.
Well, I think it probably started before we incarnated. I'm sure that it's one of the things that we contracted to do, was work together in this way. How it appeared to get started was the filmmaker Kashir Darvich and I were introduced by a mutual friend in Ojai, California, 2.5 years ago now, back in August of 2009. And Kashir came up to one of my lectures, and we talked after that lecture, and he asked how I would feel about doing some work on camera and having him start working on a film about channeling. And you know, when we started, we weren't really sure where we were going with it. We just knew, we had a sense we were supposed to be working together. So he came to my home a couple of times and did some channeling sessions with me and filmed those sessions, and he came to a group session of mine and filmed that, and then he went off to India and filmed and did some work, and he returned from India May 1st of, well, he returned from India a little bit before then, but May 1st of 2011, I invited him to come up to Ojai to experience Wendy and I channeling together. And he came up that afternoon and was at that 4-hour workshop, and afterwards that night in my home he said, "I'd like to do a lecture series with you and Wendy, and so that's how that all came about.
Well, the first one is shifting into a new dimension. So the guides spend a lot of time kind of giving you a bigger picture about really what's going on, moving from 3 to 5, and a lot of the fears around prediction and catastrophe that we're carrying. So we talk a bit about that, about dimensional structure and what each game is like, because dimensions are just ranges of frequency, and each dimension has a set of rules. It's like playing basketball or football. That game has its own rules, and the same thing is true for dimensions.
In the first one as well, there is a tremendous energetic download that the listener experiences, that the viewer experiences. It's true for all of the work, but what they've communicated to us is that energetic download that comes in on shifting into a new dimension, which is volume 1, sets the viewer up, gives foundational energetic work to then experience the rest of the information that follows throughout the series. Wendy and I, when we watched the first one, experienced it ourselves as viewers. 45 minutes into it, we just both went, whoa. We had to take a break. And we've often heard from people who've viewed it, Volume 1 and now Volume 2, that as they view multiple times, they receive more energy. They hear things they didn't hear the other times they watch them. It is a continuous process. These DVDs are meant to be watched again and again and again. This is not a one-time experience. They are lectures, they are healing sessions, and they are transmissions of amazing love from the 9th Dimensional Pleiadian Collective, Yeshua, the Lyrans, the fairies, Corolla, and the other beings who participate, who don't say their names, but who are with us. And there are many, many beings who are there who never speak their names. We never speak their names, but are participating.
And because of the nature of time, or the lack of time, the guides will connect. Every time you think about them, every time you put a DVD in, it's like being with them right then and there, because they do connect with you in that moment. And that's also why you're able to get new transmissions. It plugs you into a frequency that you can access. So it's not like only the participants who were there taping the video got that experience. They don't experience time, so they connect with you every time.
They are right there in your house with you as you watch, loving you, transmitting, guiding, healing, whatever you need. Volume 2 is called Moving from Law of Attraction into Law of Creation, and it talks all about how our manifestation process is shifting as we evolve into these 5th dimensional versions of ourselves. So it starts with the basics of Law of Attraction, because a lot of us are still using the laws of attraction and reflection to create. It talks about how we attract and how we manifest in the 3rd dimension and how energy works, and then takes the viewer into the understanding of the law of creation and what it is to be an instantaneous manifester, what it is to play with an infinite amount of energy and create in that way. Volume 3
is on sex and sexuality. And Nora and I watched clips of it recently, and we were both taken aback at how open the participants were, the broad range of questions, and I think sex in particular, and sexuality, as we move into 5D, is a question that everybody wants to know about, but nobody's talking about. So the guides kindly came through and gave their perspective on it, because it's a huge shift. And we're doing a lot of integration right now into the 1st and 2nd chakras. So we're integrating the Divine Feminine and the Divine Masculine. We can't forget the Divine Masculine. A lot of the focus right now is just on the Divine Feminine, because that's the new piece. But there's also a Divine Masculine component of this. And, you know, it's about letting go of those archetypes, about being half, being one or the other, and being both of those things within yourself.
It also covers orgasm and the use of orgasm to connect with Source, the original intention of the orgasmic experience and how to have that experience. So we're very excited about that DVD. That should be out towards the end of the summer. Wendy and I had never channeled about sex and sexuality to any great length before like that in front of an audience, in a group setting. So we did a lot of foundational work before that one, some rehearsal and practice and connection with the guides and bringing through the information. And Wendy and I, frankly, each of us processed a tremendous amount personally within ourselves last year to be able to do that lecture as well as all of the lectures in this series.
And then number 4, we hadn't planned on doing, but there were so many questions around sex and sexuality, and we didn't really get a chance, or the guides didn't get a chance to talk about the relationship aspect of that. So the 4th DVD is sex and relationships. And again, talking about the new archetype, about being a whole and complete person and bringing somebody else who is whole and complete in as well. Right now, most of our relationships are what the guys kind of describe as being horizontal. Instead of going up to connect with Source, we're trying to get to Source through other people.
Yeah.
And it's about learning to run that energy in a different way, in a more whole and complete way, and seeing everything else as being that reflection.
So that should be out towards certainly by the end of 2012, hopefully in the fall.